All right, look, you're a roofer. Some juicy government contract comes your way. You got a wife and kids, the 2-story in suburbia. This is a government contract, which means all sorts of benefits. Along come these left-wing militants and blast everything within a 3-mile radius with their lasers. You didn't ask for that. You have no personal politics. You're just trying to scrape out a living.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but what are you talking about?
The ending of Return of the Jedi.
Welcome back. We're here again. The Force is strong within us. I'm Julian Watkins, Skywalker. To my left, I have the Rev.
Fair enough.
I'm joined also by Mandy.
Yeah.
And Josh.
Just Josh.
Just Josh? Nothing else?
Nothing else.
I gotta say, you're looking a little fired up, my friend. What's going on?
I am fired up. Just about a week and a half ago, they had a Star Wars Battlefront beta opportunity. They opened 3 of their maps from the upcoming Star Wars Battlefront game to whoever wanted to play. So yeah, I jumped in on PS4 and got some action, played several hours of Battlefront. And I was a huge fan of the old Battlefront games.
Me too.
And especially too, I got really heavily into the modding community and I was creating custom maps for Battlefront 2. But the new Battlefront is basically everything I wanted it to be. And when it first came out, it was getting a lot of flack. This is super imbalanced and yada, yada, yada. Several days in, there started being more positive reception when I think the older games journalists stepped in and were like, this is a classic arcadey style Star Wars game. It's got power-ups. It's got special abilities that you equip by equipping a hand of cards. It's not a hyper-realistic shooter. It's arcadey and fun, and you've got jetpacks, and it's everything that I wanted it to be.
I like how you may not have even realized that you equated fun not with hyper-realistic shooter.
That's really how I would define the word arcadey, though, is this is designed 100% around the idea of being fun. It doesn't matter.
As opposed to the hyper-realistic shooters, which are apparently not designed to be fun.
We talked about this last week in our sound design episode about, Call of Duty being designed specifically to fulfill a certain psychological thing that your brain wants to feel like it's accomplished something. Your brain is constantly getting long-term and short-term feedback signals from Call of Duty that are telling you you're doing things. And so I almost feel like I would say it's more addictive than fun. I would say Forza is a very not arcadey game. It's designed for people who love cars and want to simulate a very realistic, driving experience. Whereas Mario Kart is you throw turtle shells at other carts and they flip over and it's fun. And it's that's designed around the idea of we don't have to be realistic. We just have to be fun. And so throwing a banana peel behind your car is not super realistic, but it's super fun.
I would say even closer would be sort of like Forza as opposed to a Need for Speed, which is still more of a realistic style of driving, but it has an arcade feel.
Right. I mean, even Need for Speed Most Wanted had the thing where you could jump through billboards and it would show you your friends, how fast your friend was going when they went through this billboard and, stuff like that. That's totally not realistic, but it's really fun to be oh yeah, I went 0.08 miles per hour faster than you did through that billboard.
It was distance.
What?
In Need for Speed, the billboard measured your distance, not the speed you were going at.
Oh yeah, you're right. You would do a jump through a billboard. And then, your air distance was the thing that the billboard measured.
Or Burnout.
Need for Speed reminds me a little of Burnout,
yeah.
Even though they're not necessarily designed the same way. They just kind of have the same vibe.
No, but I feel like that's a thing. I feel like people,
Haha, I have gotten you all with my force powers of changing the topic.
You're not wrong. You totally steered this conversation in a weird direction. But I mean, what you have with the Star Wars beta is you've got people saying things like Star Wars has these particular flaws in it. The Hoth map is completely unbalanced. It's well, yeah, it is. But playing Hoth in Battlefront as the rebels isn't about winning. It's about holding out as long as you can until finally you're overwhelmed. I think they probably will tweak the Hoth map a little bit before release, but like I'm fine with it being imbalanced. It doesn't have to be balanced. It's not Call of Duty. It's not a tournament shooter. It's designed around the idea of, let's drop players into these famous scenes from the Star Wars movies.
Yeah, I think maybe the fact that it was developed by DICE and people were expecting like this Battlefield kind of approach, which I assume it kind of is similar to in scope. If I understand correctly, you're on the ground. There's ground troops. Is there also like planes and vehicles?
Yeah, there's vehicles. You get to use the the land speeders. You actually get to pilot the AT-ATs and AT-STs.
Oh, is that right?
Right.
Oh, that's cool.
When I was younger and I was watching the Star Wars movies a lot, like I knew the difference between an AT-AT and an AT-ST, and I like forgot as I got older like which one was which. Then I realized the AT-AT is just one letter away from a cat. And so that's how I remember it now.
So which one is that? The big one or the small one?
That's the four-legged one. And so when I'm like playing Battlefront, when it comes out in November, I'll get the names right of the vehicles I'm driving.
Yeah. I will be playing Fallout 4, of course. But
No, me too.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm gonna build a sweet store. I'm gonna do some farming.
Sweet store, huh?
No, that's not my big plan. I'm gonna get a generator. I'm going to start my own farm, and I'm going to set up a shop and like sell food to people. I'm not gonna beat that game. I'm just it's gonna be AAA Harvest Moon for me.
Excellent.
Would you say in Fallout you're gonna have a moisture farm?
No, Josh, I would not say that.
That was a Star Wars joke. In case you missed it.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What's everybody else been up to?
I got a game called Not the Robots. And it's a stealth game where you are a robot in an office building and you have to eat all the furniture on the floor and not get caught by their security drones, which will shoot you. And
which is like the best concept for a game.
It is. It's a fantastic concept. And what makes it especially tricky is that the furniture is the stuff you hide behind. So as you progress through the room and eat the furniture, you are eating your hiding spots. So, and then you have to make it back to the starting point after you eat enough furniture.
They should have called it Not the Droids You Were Looking For.
You're just going to keep trying with this, aren't you?
He's taking the heat off of me for this episode.
I will powerbomb you through the microphone table.
Well, hold on. We're not speaking Spanish.
That's okay.
That's a wrestling joke, folks.
It is, actually.
Usually the Hispanic speaking
right.
table.
No, it's a very good wrestling joke, in fact.
It was almost as good as my droids joke.
No, it was better by...
Yeah, it was better by a long shot.
Yes.
And I shot first.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it, both of you!
What about you, Mandy? What you been up to?
I'm super into hedgehogs.
All right. How's that going for you?
I like reading about animals and watching animal documentaries. And usually if I get really fixated on an animal, it's because it's really cool or really smart. But I mean, hedgehogs aren't really cool or really smart. They're just cute.
What do they do? I mean, is there like what role do they play in the animal kingdom?
They're mostly garden pests, but not really even that much of a pest. Like, they can actually be nice because they'll eat bugs in your garden for you. And they're so heavily domesticated right now, too. So they're kind of like little hamsters that can purr. But
Really?
I was watching a documentary about chipmunks last night. And, like, chipmunks are jerks. Oh, my gosh, they're just the worst.
Yeah.
They are.
Like, they steal each other's food instead of gathering their own food. So, like, they leave each other to starve. And, like, in the documentary I was watching, the one chipmunk took all this chipmunk's food, and when the chipmunk came back, it tried to kill it. And it had to, like, run away and escape, but with no food.
Wow.
But, I mean, hedgehogs, they aren't jerks. All they do is cover themselves in their own spit sometimes.
For what reason?
Nobody knows. Like, nobody seriously knows why hedgehogs do this. Nobody has figured it out. There's no discernible benefit. They just like their own spit. But,
Just a fetish.
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe they just like to keep themselves heavily lubricated so they can travel at such high speeds.
They don't really go that fast. I mean, Sonic the Hedgehog should have been a chipmunk. Because they have attitude.
Yeah, they are. They do have attitude.
They have tude, and
They have tude.
They travel fast.
They have tude to the extreme.
But like all those old cartoons where Chip and Dale are just jerks to Donald Duck, like those are scientifically accurate cartoons.
Yeah.
But I mean, I look at like little gifs of hedgehogs rolling around in boots, or like pictures of hedgehogs posing cutely in baking pans. So I'm basically like Josh with Snapple,
Yeah.
except with hedgehogs.
I do notice, though, that you are currently holding, as always, a Snapple.
It's been kind of a touch and go situation here. I've been traveling to a lot of various Targets in the suburbs of Minneapolis, and this shit's getting hard to find, man.
Yeah.
I was worried that maybe they were discontinuing Snapple Apple, because I could buy it in a 6-pack before, and now I can't anywhere. And so I was looking around and I started Googling it, and it turns out that this like Snapple Apple panic has been a thing for quite some time.
Really?
I was finding old forums from like 2011, and people were claiming that Snapple had discontinued Snapple Apple. And, then there would be the other person who would chime in and be like, I just bought some at Walmart. And then, of course, everyone would ignore that person and then keep talking about how, no, it's discontinued in the
like,
U.S.
Hey, listen, dude, shut up, you fool. You got some, keep it on the low down.
I had a panic there for a moment that Snapple Apple would be a thing of my past.
So you can still buy Lucy's, but you can't find the case?
Right. But even the one at a times we're getting a little hard to find there.
No, it's kind of scary too. I mean, you had to go through some things to get that.
I did.
Get that Snapple.
I did some things I wasn't proud of.
We were at Target in downtown, and we went to check the Snapple aisle, and there was some lady on something in the Snapple aisle just like obsessively counting Snapple and saying how much it was.
No, it was meth. It was absolutely.
She's like, $1, Snapple's $1. Like, and so we sort of walked away, and then we circled around to come back, and she was still there, and Josh went for it. He wanted that Snapple enough to risk the anger of a meth head.
We left for a good like 15 minutes to go look at other things, and then we came back, and she was still like in the Snapple aisle, like $1, Snapple, $1. And I was like, oh my gosh.
It's a good deal.
It is a good deal.
It's so good that it completely erased her cognitive function. It just reprogrammed her in a language that was only able to say Snapple, $1.
I mean, I think the meth probably did that.
A little bit.
Probably.
A little bit. But let's be honest, Snapple Apple is some dangerous shit.
It's true. Target's just been a weird experience lately. Like, we've been trying to look at the new Star Wars toys, and Target they don't have the kind of selection that I want to see when I look at new Star Wars toys.
Mm-hmm. You want to open up a briefcase and just have like a warm golden glow bathe your face.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want the Pulp Fiction experience.
Yeah.
When I go to Target, and that's not what they're giving me. They're giving me the Amiibo experience, and it's kind of a bummer.
That is a bummer. That's a bad experience.
I found the only Star Wars toy I've purchased at GameStop, actually, because I couldn't find what I wanted at Target.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted the little round droid that I can't think of the name of.
BB-8.
So like the toys for the new movie,
Yeah,
they're out.
They're out, but they're at Target. They're really picked over. So I think there are probably people who are going and buying up all the Snapple Apple and buying up all the Star Wars toys. But I got my little BB-8. He's super cute.
Oh yeah.
But I had to go to GameStop for this. Target was just not delivering.
Yeah. Did you encounter your nervous fan?
No, I'm not going to that GameStop right now.
That guy really fucked up.
The thing is, like, I don't even want to buy a lot of Star Wars toys because I don't know if the new movie will be any good, and I don't want to be sad about having a bunch of toys from a terrible Star Wars movie. But this little guy, I'm confident no matter how bad the movie is, I'll like him anyways.
And not to be controversial here, but what did you guys think of the Star Trek reboot that J.J. Abrams kicked out?
Like, the first one, thought the second one was terrible.
Yeah. That's usually how it goes. I wasn't a Star Trek fan really at all, but I enjoyed that first one quite a bit. So I have faith in the guy. Look, JJ, I got faith in you, man. With that, I think I'm going to call for a break. Let our midichlorian levels kind of even out and, chill for a sec. As always, I got to thank some people. And you know who you are, but it doesn't go without saying. So 2XAA and Wheelie for the music. Thank you very, very much, bros. retroevolve.com. You can find us there. Where else are we? Well, of course, obviously, halfglassgaming.com. Geekparty.com, which I hear is making a bit of a comeback. We're also on iTunes. You can check us out there, download us. Yeah, so when we get back, we're going to probably get back into the Star Wars discussion. Until then, may the Force be with you. All right, we're back. We're going to have a discussion. That's Vodka that you hear. Don't be alarmed. He is a professional.
I am a professional.
And so where are we? Who's going to kick this roundtable discussion off? Star Wars games, I guess, is what we'll talk about, huh? There's been a few of those.
Most of them aren't great.
Most of them aren't great. Okay, look, we're not going to sugarcoat this for you.
I think the best Star Wars games are the 3 for the Super Nintendo. Super Star Wars, Super Empire Strikes Back, Super Return of the Jedi.
I was super into Star Wars when I was a kid, but as a kid, I really didn't play Star Wars video games, and I don't know why. Mm-hmm. I've played a little of the Super Star Wars games as an adult, and I definitely would have liked them as a kid, but I never picked them up. When I was really little, I actually thought Star Wars was a TV show, because we had the VHS tapes, and so it was on the TV all the time, and so it just sort of seemed like a sort of space comedy TV show with recurring gags, like that Han Solo always getting frozen in carbonite. But I don't know, I never really thought to look for them. I have the old issue of Nintendo Power with Darth Vader on the cover, but I never really remember thinking to seek them out. I never owned them. I didn't get really into Star Wars games until I stopped liking Star Wars, which was when Star Wars Episode 1 Racer came out.
So what was the first Star Wars game you did play?
Star Wars Episode 1 Racer.
Ah.
It was on the N64. There was also an arcade version, but it was
really?
a different pod racing game.
It was the same idea, it's just a different version of it?
It was not made by the same development team. There were just 2 games about pod racing. The arcade one, you actually got to ride on a pod racer.
Really?
It's super fun. But the N64 one was basically just Wipeout Star Wars, and I love Wipeout. So.
Yeah, I played it briefly. I thought it was okay.
Wipeout was the reason I bought my PS1.
Yeah.
The funny thing about Super Star Wars is I replayed Super Empire Strikes Back just the other night, and I remember that being my favorite one. I don't remember why. And at first it's like, oh yeah, you're playing as Luke on Hoth. You've got the Imperial March music going on. You get on a Tauntaun and ride around. There's lightsabers and lightsaber sounds that for the 16-bit era sound pretty spot on. The Tauntaun sound pretty spot on for the 16-bit era. And I was like, yeah, this really feels like Star Wars. And then I realized, as I'm playing it, I'm like, wait, I'm on Hoth, and there's all these ice boars that are attacking me, and there's these tentacle plants that look like they came from Toe Jam and Earl, these little tentacle plants with eyeballs all over them, and it's like, what is going on here?
Well, I think the problem was that they didn't base the games on Star Wars or The Empire Strikes Back. They based them on the lesser known movies Super Star Wars and Super Empire Strikes Back.
I think they're they get to making the game and they're like, oh shit, Hoth is just this desolate land.
Yeah.
What do we do? And so they just
and
they just threw in all these crazy creatures. Oh yeah, this will make it more like a video game. And the crazy thing is I played for a good 15-20 minutes before I realized, oh, wait. And so, to me, I was just oh, this is a great Star Wars experience. And I was like, but what? I don't know. I'm not going to try to say that it didn't work because it did.
Well, I don't know. It seems like of the few that I've played, the best Star Wars games were ones that really weren't based solely on replicating the movie, but were based on ideas from the universe. The pod racing. What was the Rogue Squadron games?
The Rogue Squadron books. That's what they were based on.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So I mean, it's just this idea of being in the Star Wars universe and shooting those cool sounding lasers.
Force Unleashed. That was a sweet game.
Yeah, that was actually a really super cool game, and you were just a dude. Basically a generic Han Solo, kind of. He had no real ability other than to shoot a gun.
In The Force Unleashed?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking, what am I thinking of?
The N64 game
Yeah.
that was based off of the Extended Universe book
Shadow of the Empire?
Shadow of the Empire.
Shadow of
I
the
think it is.
Empire, yes. Basically, yeah, you're like playing cleanup for the first trilogy, basically. You're on Hoth fighting in that battle, and then you get inside, and then you see like the Millennium Falcon.
Right. Well, it's based on an Extended Universe book that took place during the time of the third movie. So in that book, like you're playing the protagonist of that book.
Yeah, you fight Boba Fett and that robot, the R80KP7 or whatever his name is.
In The Force Unleashed, you're actually playing as like proto Luke Skywalker, because like Luke Skywalker's original name was Starkiller, and they changed it. And so then in The Force Unleashed, you get to finally play as Starkiller, basically coming up as Darth Vader's apprentice.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it's
You're a
pretty
clone,
awesome.
aren't you?
Starkiller from Force Unleashed was not a clone originally, but in Force Unleashed 2, you were playing as a clone of Starkiller who's haunted by memories.
I played the Wii version, and I know there were some differences between the different versions. And in the first level, you're playing as Darth Vader, and you just go to Kashyyyk, the Wookiee planet, and you just like tear the shit out of a bunch of Wookiees. And it's like, whoa.
That's awesome.
The scene that sticks with me the most, and I think they might have cut this from the Wii version, but there's a scene where the Starkiller guy, like, there's a Star Destroyer in space, like, above the planet, and he, like, uses his force power to, like, pull it down from space and, like, crash it.
Yeah.
That was some cool shit. Although I think it's a little... I mean, if the Force was capable of these things, like, you think that these Jedis would be going around just like, let's just fly up in a TIE fighter and, like, smash all these Star Destroyers together, like, battle over.
Starkiller was in one of the Soul Cal games, too.
Oh, yeah, really?
It wasn't Darth Vader in it?
Vader was in a Soul Cal game, and so was Yoda.
Yeah, so was Link.
So is Heihachi from Tekken.
Kratos.
Which makes the most sense.
So is Spawn!
Heihachi makes the most sense because it's a Namco game.
Yeah.
Speaking of Namco games, there was a game I used to play in the arcade, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast before, but there's a game called Starblade, and this wasn't officially a Star Wars game, but it kind of was. And like, you pilot some kind of fighter, and you're dogfighting in space. There's actually one part where you fly inside of this giant spaceship shaped like a big sphere, and you like fly inside of it, and then you like blow up the core of it and then fly out. And it's like, that happened in Return of the Jedi, didn't it?
I was going to say, that'd be a great premise for a movie.
They did a Sega CD port of this game, and, being one of the suckers who had a Sega CD in the early 90s, I bought the port, and it was super shitty because I even like went back and watched some YouTube videos to verify this, but like, I remember being a kid and playing Starblade for the Sega CD and being so excited because I could finally take home this game from the arcades, and they didn't put textures on the ships. It was just like wireframes. A lot of the ships you were fighting against were just wireframe models, and in the arcade it wasn't like that, but in the Sega CD game they must have like had to save memory or something.
Oh yeah.
In like looking for this game again, I saw on the Wikipedia page that some people claim that this game was an early inspiration for Star Fox, and I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, I could see that.
But Namco actually made a Star Wars game.
Which one was that?
It was a 1987 game. It was just called Star Wars. It was for the Famicom. It was only released in Japan. And it was just your standard Star Wars platformer game, except it was super, super weird. And the boss of every planet was Darth Vader. But Darth Vader always could transform into something. So you go to fight Darth Vader and you do some damage, and then he'd turn into a pterodactyl or a shark.
Yeah, that sounds a little familiar.
And then, like, I guess in the instruction
Shark
booklet,
Vader.
they explained it as they were visions of Darth Vader that represented Luke Skywalker's fears, except these visions of Darth Vader, like, kidnapped Princess Leia and Han Solo. And Chewbacca could speak, like, Galactic Base Standard, and Luke Skywalker was the one who piloted the Millennium Falcon, and he had black hair, but that was probably NES limitations. I've played it, and it's insanely hard, so that's probably why it didn't come out here, and not because of inaccuracies. But I mean, what a cool game! Who doesn't want to fight Darth Vader as a pterodactyl?
I own Knights of the Old Republic, the BioWare RPG, which, I don't know, I never got into. I also got one of the Jedi Academy games. I got those two and Dark Forces for on Steam for some Steam sale.
You know, Jedi Academy was a Dark Forces game.
That's entertaining. I did not know that.
They the Dark Forces games were named similarly to how the Rambo movies are named. They don't make any sense because it's like the first Rambo movie didn't even have Rambo in the title of it. It was just First Blood, and then Rambo 2 was Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Yeah.
Then Rambo 3 was just Rambo 3, and then Rambo 4 was just Rambo. So Dark Forces was the first one, and then Dark Forces 2 was Jedi Knight. Jedi Knight 2 was Jedi Outcast, and then what would have been Jedi Knight 3, or what are we at? Dark Forces 4 was Jedi Knight Jedi Academy.
Entertaining. But otherwise, it's just been the Super Nintendo games. But one thing I liked about the 2 of the 3 Super Nintendo games that I don't feel other Star Wars games really do is make use of the different characters. Because like in Super Star Wars and Super Return of the Jedi, if there's a level based on some scene and there were multiple characters that were in that scene, they're all playable characters for that stage. So, like in Return of the Jedi, you're on the sand barge at Jabba's palace before he tosses Han Solo down a thing, and you can play as Chewbacca, as Luke, or as Leia. They don't play all that differently, but they sort of do. Like Chewbacca is sort of this long-range blaster, Luke has the Force powers, and Leia is a more melee type in the bikini with a chain. And that was kind of funny.
Oh, that is. Yeah, do you remember the Star Wars fighting game?
Vaguely.
That was like something on the Tessa Kasai or some weird...
Yeah, on the PS1.
Yeah.
That was bad.
It was basically like a ripoff of the game that Mandy had just mentioned.
Soul Calibur.
Yeah.
Yeah, the game you're thinking of is Masters of the Terraskasi.
Is that how you say it?
That's how I've always said it.
Star Wars has had a really weird history in video games because LucasArts couldn't make Star Wars games for a long time. That's why the Super Star Wars games didn't show up until the Super Nintendo.
Why was that?
When LucasArts was founded, they didn't have the rights to make Star Wars video games. And not a lot of other people were making Star Wars games either. I think what happened is that George Lucas had licensed that stuff out, but then the video game crash happened, and so people didn't necessarily want to take advantage of those licenses and make Star Wars games. By the time they got the rights back, LucasArts was a successful game studio. They'd made a lot of really cool, really weird adventure games. And I'm glad that they could make Star Wars games because Maniac Mansion is kind of cooler than any Star Wars game that isn't pod racing.
Yeah.
They didn't make official Star Wars games back in like the 70s and 80s, or like the late 70s, early 80s. But
although they did make official Star Wars games, there's a couple of them on the Atari.
Yeah, you're right. There are actually 4 Star Wars games for the Atari 2600. I feel like they were all put out by Parker Brothers, which is kind of weird. But no, I misspoke. What I meant was there weren't a lot of official Star Wars games in that era. But what you did have a lot of was unofficial Star Wars games. Like, for example, there was one game called Starhawk that came out in 1979, and it was basically just the trench run from the first Star Wars movie.
Yeah?
But it's funny because years later, in the PS3 era, there was another game called Starhawk, and they released a DLC pack that was like this forest planet, and it was basically Endor. Like, it was exactly Endor. And so it's funny that there's these 2 games, both called Starhawk, both completely unrelated, but they both like aped Star Wars.
Well, I think just about everything has aped Star Wars at some point or another. It's Star Wars.
Well, but LucasArts has also kind of released a bunch of games outside of the Star Wars.
Yeah, I actually think LucasArts' most memorable games have nothing to do with Star Wars.
I mean,
didn't they make the Sam and Max series?
They made Curse of Monkey Island.
I associate LucasArts with adventure games before Star Wars.
Right.
Gladius. Grim Fandango. They made my favorite Mercenaries, which I thought was
on the
totally
Xbox.
Yeah,
That was a very Star Wars-esque game, though. That was sort of
true.
like
Well, you could
Spaceballsy more so than Star Wars, I
could
guess.
unlock
But
Han Solo, I think, skin.
yeah,
Indiana Jones skins. But yeah, Sam and Max, The Secret of Monkey Island, and then just, a shit ton of Star Wars games. They also did Zombies Ate My Neighbors.
no, that was
This
a
is a
super fun
classic game. Classic.
Traxian as well, and Thrillville, so...
And now Disney owns LucasArts.
They killed Star Wars 1313. What a bunch of jerks.
Yeah.
Star Wars 1313 was a really interesting game, though. And I was at E3 the year that they showed it off, and I didn't get to see it, but a couple of my friends did. And it looked like it was going to be super cool. It was getting a lot of comparisons to, like, Uncharted set in the Star Wars universe, only you play as a bounty hunter.
Yeah.
The thing about the bounty hunter is they started developing the game as sort of a generic bounty hunter. 8 weeks before E3, George Lucas comes in. He's like, hey, can you guys make the bounty hunter Boba Fett? And they're like, George Lucas. But I mean, so they did it. And then they get ready to show it up at E3 and they're like, oh, by the way, you can't tell anybody that the bounty hunter is Boba Fett. Pretend he's a generic bounty hunter.
He's like, that's what we were planning on doing all along, George.
Yeah.
And then he was like, hey, remember that kid that Anakin plays with as a kid? Like, why don't we make that Greedo? Like, remember that droid that Anakin's building in his hut? Like, why don't we make that C-3PO? Like,
That's the thing, is like, that guy comes in in the last minute and just throws a monkey island wrench into everything. Man.
But that's the thing is Star Wars 1313 is like, they just had so many setbacks because at first they're like, hey, can you make a Gears of War game with Star Wars? And they're like, yeah, we can do that. So they started making Gears of War Star Wars and they're like, hey, turn it into a game that like feels like an HBO television series, but Star Wars. And they're like, well, it's not very Gears of War, but yeah, we can probably do that. And they're like, hey, can you turn it into like this cool story-driven action-adventure game starring like a generic bounty hunter, and then the George Lucas thing, and then the game gets canceled after all of that. But the cool thing is that some of the technology they developed for that game is actually being used in the new Star Wars movie, which I didn't know was a thing, that video game technology could be used in films. But I'm glad something's come out of that. I've seen some of the footage and assets from Star Wars 1313, and I mean, it looked like it would have been a super good game, and the team obviously
a
worked
lot of hype for it.
super hard on it.
Yeah.
the number 1313 has something to do with Boba Fett, though. And I remember people shortly after E3 had figured out that it was going to be a Boba Fett game. And I don't remember exactly what the connection was, but it was like 1313 had something to do with Boba Fett.
Well, that was his PIN number.
His bank.
That's why they couldn't say it was Boba Fett. They're like, oh, no, you can't do that. Boba will be really pissed at George.
Can't you keep a secret? I think the best answer when George comes in and says, hey, can you change gears once more and make a game like this, is to say, yeah, we can do that. But can we also change the locks on the doors and not give you a key?
CT-1313 is actually an alias that Boba Fett used in the expanded universe.
Didn't Boba Fett die in Return of the Jedi?
Not in the expanded universe.
That's
because
the stupidest thing I've
well,
ever
I mean,
heard.
There is a whole series of books for kids that starred like a young Boba Fett, and that's what that came out of, so it doesn't matter.
Wait, wasn't his old man the guy they cloned for all those stormtroopers?
Yes, Jango
Fett. They said it would take 1,000 years for the Sarlacc to digest a person. And so you think about it, and it's like, this dude's got a jetpack. Like, he falls into the belly of this beast that it's going to take 1,000 years to digest him. So it's like digestive acids are basically water.
Yeah.
And so he falls into this thing filled with water, and he gets his jetpack working again, and he just flies out.
Yeah, you had a good couple of months before you really have to worry.
Right. He could just, like, build himself a little
floaty
door, like in Titanic.
I mean, I think something like that happened in The Rocketeer.
Yeah, you would just die of old age or starvation before he even begins to digest you.
It's not, I mean, you probably die of shock. You get Gwen Stacy'd.
Too soon.
Too soon! It's like, that's older than our parents, man. Well, you know, there's a bounty hunter named Jango Fett in The Witcher 3.
And there it is, folks. We couldn't have an episode without a Witcher's reference.
So one of the interesting things about the new Battlefront game is that they've done some things with the lore, and I think we got a little peek into how some of the things in the new movie series are going to work. Because there are female stormtroopers in the game, which some people are going to have a problem with because it's like, clone troopers are clones of Jango Fett. And it's like, well, when did they shut down the cloning facility? And once they shut down the cloning facility, they still need stormtroopers. It's not like...
Well, how many have been killed at this point? They got to be running out.
I think somebody actually went through the various canon sources and discovered that by the time of the first Death Star, there weren't any more clone troopers. Like, they were all just normal hires at that point.
Contractors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the boss?
Yeah. In fact, I was playing, actually. I went back into Metal Gear the other day, and I was crawling around a camp, and two guys get together, and they're like, hey, man, did you hear Big Boss is back? The guy's like, yeah, he blew up that fueling station or something. And the guy's like, oh, man, hopefully we aren't contracted to go up against him. And he was like, you goddamn right. I'm the one laying in this mud.
The thing about Battlefront that's really weird is that you can play as Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader in that game.
At various points in the bigger maps, while you're playing, you can get a power-up that lets you play as Darth Vader if you're playing on the Empire side, and Luke Skywalker if you're playing on the Rebel side. And you can temporarily play as this hero, but you have a timer and it's counting down, and as you're taking damage, the counter will go down faster.
But the thing is, like, you move like super, super fast, and it looks so weird because, you know, in the original trilogy, like, they had everybody move super slowly, really deliberately. And so it just, you look at it and you're like, that's wrong. That's wrong. It shouldn't look like that. And so I was almost laughing while Josh was, like, doing this cool stuff as Darth Vader because it just looked so weird to me to see Darth Vader moving that quickly.
Yeah, you don't picture Darth Vader moving like Darth Maul. Like, you picture him, like, slow and intimidating and, like...
I think, isn't it in the first episode of The Force Unleashed where you actually play Darth?
Yeah.
And it's just like the longest, slowest. I mean, it's like you thought the beginning of
thought it was
Phantom Pain
cool.
was bad, okay?
I thought the beginning of Phantom Pain was cool too.
Yeah. Now, the Battlefront games, as I remember, you just basically play large battles from throughout the Star Wars like films and whatever.
And
Right.
the Star Wars movies don't have that many big epic battles, really. Like, George Lucas doesn't really like fight choreography. And I mean, in the original trilogy, I don't mind so much because stuff doesn't look super rehearsed. The fights are kind of slow and simple, but they don't feel like people doing specific steps. And then I guess I don't know what he did for fight choreography in the prequels, but they look so choreographed and it drives me crazy.
It's like everybody's a band leader. They're baton twirling. And
it's like a freaking sci-fi boy band
like,
with swords, with light swords,
Yeah,
and that's not what I want to see.
Who taught you that, like, spinning it behind your back and, like, doing all this ridiculous shit is going to win a fight?
Do you watch Donnie Yen movies much? I feel like you might.
Oh, Donnie Yen, yeah.
Like, it should feel like either person, no matter what you're watching, can die at any second. You can be watching, like, a kid's show, and you're like, oh my god, that guy's gonna get stabbed and die. Even though you know it's not possible. That's what good fight choreography feels like. That's what Star Wars never, ever feels like.
The Raid and The Raid 2.
Now that's like Daredevil type fight choreography where you can just feel every blow and like you can see it in the fights and you're like, oh man, that's killing him. You gotta go easy, man.
What's cool about that is those guys are actually fighting.
Yeah,
They're not pulling punches or stage fighting. They choreograph it and kick each other's butts.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, like, a fight can be choreographed without being a stupid boy band dance routine, but George Lucas doesn't understand that. He needs to talk to Steven Spielberg, and Steven Spielberg isn't a great fight choreographer either.
No,
but.
it's like, listen, I'm going to take a tangent here and say that some of the worst fighting I've seen in a movie was the Daredevil movie and the Elektra movie. And the Catwoman movie.
All three of those movies couldn't understand if they wanted to decide if they wanted to be a grim, gritty super grimy action movie or like a goofy comedy movie. And so it's like these bizarre total shifts, like this super goofy scene, and then like, hey, let's go murder a bunch of people and make it really dark and sad, and then let's all laugh at this stupid joke.
It's like a Baz Luhrmann movie.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Except less visually appealing because they look bad. They are not well shot movies, and I'm not a fan of him, but at least he knows how to set up a good color palette.
Baz Luhrmann's a hack.
Yeah, but color, he knows how to use color. Will you agree with that?
He knows how to set up a really artistic, beautiful shot and then tear it apart and piss on it and set it on fire.
Yeah. But I take that over Ben Affleck Daredevil.
Yeah, that was a shame.
TV show is good though. Like, no, that was just kind of a bad time for movies based on property you loved, because that was the time of the prequels, and then there were a lot of mediocre superhero movies around that time. People just did not want to do good work when working with somebody else's properties. You know who did a good job with Star Wars, though, is Lego. Lego Star Wars games are fantastic. Yeah,
I actually got Star Wars Battlefront 2 for Christmas one year. And that same year, I got Lego Star Wars, the original one. And I didn't play Battlefront 2 for like a month because the Lego Star Wars game was so freaking good. They had this way of making those scenes that we've played 1,000 times feel fresh and new and fun, and had like a lighthearted enough feel. I mean, you can die in those games, but it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
Because you're just going to reform and maybe you'll lose some studs or whatever. But like, there's really no fail state in those games, and you can just keep playing and playing and playing. And I don't know, like the Lego Star Wars games just hit on something that I think people had wanted for a really long time and hadn't really seen or hadn't even known to ask for. And the Lego series has been hit or miss. For sure, but the first Lego Star Wars games were really phenomenal games.
The thing about Lego Star Wars is that like everybody who grew up with Star Wars sort of just wants to sit down and play Star Wars and remember why they liked it in the first place. And so that's what it is. That's what all the Lego games are. They're just playing with toys. And it's gamified, sure, but it feels like sitting down and playing with toys.
Yeah, it's like, maybe just playing this game that really there's no challenge, aside from the awkward platforming, but that's just a camera issue for me when I played it. But that you can just experience things that you love in sequence. You can kind of be a part of it. And then you can collect all those goddamn Lego bricks.
And the first Lego Star Wars game was actually based on the prequel trilogy, and it was still a fantastic game. I was super surprised at just how damn addictive that game was.
And the thing about the prequels is they weren't good movies, and I won't defend them in any way, but they did have some good toys. I bought some prequel toys, and, I still think they're cool.
I have a Darth Maul toy from The Phantom Menace that I bought when I was like 19, and it has a like cloth cape, and he's got like the desert speeder, and it's super cool.
Oh, was the pack?
Yeah.
I have the Target special edition Darth Vader where his costume's all red, and it was supposed to be related to the end of the movie, and it made no sense, but it looks really cool. It's like a red shiny Darth Vader.
That is cool. Those toys had like little things you could stand them on and they would say something. Is that right?
No, that's just one of the little plastic figures.
I mean, but that line of...
Oh, yeah! The prequel trilogy toys came with chips as an accessory, and you could buy a chip reader, and then you would scan the chips, and it would give you quotes from all of those characters.
Yeah.
And so you could have like the Padme Amidala one, and it would say like Padme things with absolutely no inflection in her voice at all. So exactly like the movies.
Yeah. Has there ever been a better Darth Vader than Hayden Christensen?
He wasn't supposed to be allowed to play Darth Vader because they were going to just because Darth Vader is super tall and Hayden Christensen is kind of short. And they're like, well, the suit is bigger than you are, dude. He's like, no, I'm not going to play Anakin for 2 movies and not be able to like wear the suit.
I can respect that.
No, I can too.
Yeah, I think the craziest part is that when George went back in and sort of altered the original trilogy, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
And he altered the deal.
And basically, like, started bringing in elements from like those prequels.
Why would you change the club scene from Return of the Jedi? Like, why would you change the song? Like,
Any of that shit. Why would you put Hayden Christensen's face on Darth Vader just to be like, hey, he's the Darth Vader here too, guys? You know, it's like, if anything, go back and change the trilogy and make that more like the original one.
right.
And then everybody would be happy.
I actually think of all of the Star Wars movies, well, all 3 of the original Star Wars movies, Empire Strikes Back fared the best for the stuff that got added to it. The movie still feels exactly how it felt originally.
Yeah.
Jedi fared the worst because they changed the music. Like, why would you change the music? They added Naboo to like the Ewok celebration scene at the end. And like, it's just, come on, man, it's so bad. Like, we didn't want that. We don't want that. We didn't need it. Like,
In China, a lot of the times they'll come out with bootleg versions of popular movies, and they'll just be filmed in a movie theater, and then they'll release them on DVD. And they put out one for the 3rd prequel movie, and they called it Backstroke of the West. And these movies have English subtitles, but the people doing them don't really speak English, so everything they say is just ridiculous. The one I always remember the most is when Darth Vader screams "no," which is the worst part of episode 3 anyways. They change it to "do not want."
Do not want.
Well, they're not wrong.
Yeah.
That's really...
it's what fans have been screaming for years.
So maybe it wasn't somebody who didn't speak English. It was just somebody's like, look, George Lucas, this is what I think of your movie.
I think the one thing that we can kind of conclude from this discussion is that George Lucas, you know, he might be an all right guy. I don't know him. When it comes to Star Wars, that guy can be a real sumbitch.
Bill Wasserman of Star Wars.
He is the Bill Wasserman of Star Wars, okay? And, you know, George, I gotta tell you, bro, you did some good stuff. You done some bad stuff, too, though. But, you know, for whatever animosity that I have towards you, you did create Star Wars ultimately, and from that, we've been able to play several okay games and a couple of really fun games, and, you know, may the Force be with you, homie. Dun 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 dun. Half-Glass Gaming. I am your father.
You know, Darth Vader never actually said, "Luke, I am your father."
He didn't? Who said it?
Nobody did. It's just one of those misremembered quotes. The full quote is, "Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. He told me you killed him. No, search your heart. You know it to be true." Like, he never actually says, "I am your father."
I wish he had.
Sure,
I'm sure
that's
there will
the
be
line everybody remembers.
I'm sure there will be a cut in the future where George Lucas inserts that.
I think he already did, actually. So
Awesome.